Okay, more mailbag. So this is the first one for this segment, and it's from Kevin Porter, and he writes, in respect of the Roland A880 video I did in 2016. God, that's a long time ago, isn't it? I'm looking at one of these on eBay, a Japanese unit. Is there a limit to the number of outputs that can be split or merged? And I'm guessing the transformer isn't a multi-tap for various voltages. So, dealing with the two questions asked. In terms of the way it works, the A880 basically has 8 ins and 8 outs, okay? And you could route one channel on here to one channel on there, and therefore you effectively have 8 ins to 8 outs. The other thing you can do is you can merge one channel on here to 2 channels on here, like that. In which case you then you limit your ins and outs, because you're taking 2 of the outputs for that, and therefore you've only got 6 left. The way the A80 is designed to work is you set up programs, you set up patches on the A880, not the A80 because that's a keyboard. You set up patches effectively that change the routing based on what you are doing. So for song 1 in a set, you may be routing channel 1 to MIDI channel, the out MIDI channels 1 and 3. For song number 2, you may be routing channel 2 to 2 and 3 and channel 1 to channel 5. Do you get the drift? That's kind of what the A80 is all about, is this routing and allowing you to sort of go through a patch system. Now I use it extensively in the studio so that I don't have to keep pulling wires out. So I've got a patch panel that sits underneath, and quite often when I'm playing with various different instruments, I have the MIDI routed into one of the inputs, so all my master keyboards that I use for master work all have a input into the A80, and then I can route them very, very quickly through to a number of modules that I constantly use with them. So for argument's sake, the M1's wired up, the JB280 is wired up, and I can quite easily send a MIDI signal just by routing on the A80 through to the JB280 and the M1 simultaneously, if you get my drift. That's kind of how I use it in the studio. So that's the first part of the question. The second part of the question is around multi-tap transformers. Now, what I've experienced over the years of playing around with the insides of modules and tone modules and keyboards is that Roland, on the higher end gear, tended to put multi-tap transformers in, and they also tended to put most of the, or if not all of the wiring you need to transfer the voltage down from, or step it up if you like, to a different region. It's a technician exercise, it's not something I recommend people who really have no idea do about it, but effectively you get the schematics out, and the schematics say either move 1 or 2 wires on the transformer to change the windings, and by moving the wires and changing the windings, effectively you are telling the transformer that you're in a different voltage zone. Now when you do that, if you're going up or down, there is sometimes a requirement to put a fuse in the way, just to protect the circuit, and it tells you exactly what that fuse needs to look like, so you can do that. So there are various things you need to sort of just be mindful of when you do a step up or step down. But the higher end Roland gear tended to be that way. Now what I've also found is the lower end, or the peripherals, and I wouldn't say the A880 was a lower end piece of equipment, but it is quite a small piece of equipment. They were done with a single transformer for the region that they were being sold. So it would have been a European spec, which is what my A80 is, and obviously Europe works at 230, 240 volts at well, whatever. So my mind's gone blank. Whereas there would have obviously been a version that was sold into the US at 120 volts, and a version that was sold into Japan at or Far East at 100 volts. So there were different, effectively, power board, and that's what the video was about, because I actually bought a unit that had a Duff power supply, wasn't in particularly good nick. Then I managed to acquire a unit that had a perfectly good power supply. Sorry, the wrong way around, isn't it? I acquired a unit that had I can't remember which way around it was now, a good power supply that was in, the externals were in better nick, but the internals of mine were in better nick than the other one, so I transplanted the whole thing together. And really, I mean, it's really quite a shame actually, to be honest, because I mean, you know, putting a multi-tap transformer in there probably wouldn't have cost them that many more dollars, and if they were probably working to a price point, then that's the reason why they didn't do it. I probably would have made it quite a bit heavier though, because you have to have multiple windings, but yeah, hope that answers your question. Okay, the next one for this segment comes from Mark Darling, who writes, in response to my SMR status quo, Aria and System8 predominantly. So in short, you really need the MX-1 to run audio from these three pieces of equipment, or an audio interface. Can you recommend an audio interface? I don't want to drop another $500 on the MX-1. I've already spent a lot of money on the System 1, the TB3 and the TR8. Well, you know, if you bought those three modules, you've probably dropped $1,000, so I suppose another 500 quid would probably sting the back pocket. First of all, bottom line, you don't need to spend $500 on an audio interface. These, well, this is a TR8, that's a TB3, this is a System 8. All of them will present audio channels to your computer. Okay, I believe, and I've not looked at the specs of this in a while, I think that's 8, 2 and 2, so there's 12 channels of audio. Now, the problem with this is it would present 3 separate USB feeds, and most of the time you can only select one USB interface feed into your DAW. So what you have to do effectively, well, definitely on the Mac anyway, I can't remember on the Windows because I haven't used Windows for a long while from doing this. I do everything, all my sequencing and DAW work on a Mac now. Just purely because it just works better than my Windows machine ever did in this area. But, you know, it's personal preference. You have to trick the machine into seeing these as one interface effectively, which is, I've done a video on it, it's called aggregating the USB audio inputs. So you aggregate the inputs, the DAW sees them as one input, and effectively it presents 12 channels of audio to your DAW that you can then select and assign to various recording pieces. So you don't need to drop on an audio interface. If you did want to drop some money on an audio interface, then I think you need to ask yourself a number of questions. And these start along these lines. This is sort of kind of how I did it. First of all, do you want USB or Thunderbolt? So there are two predominant interfaces. Thunderbolt tends to be more expensive than USB. You want to go for a USB-C instrument or interface rather than a USB 2. And the reason for that is that Thunderbolt operates at 10 gigabytes per second. Okay, that's the transfer speed. USB-C, USB 3 operates at 4.8 gigabytes, and USB 2 considerably less than that. Okay, so depending on how much audio data you're going to be pushing up and down, and I suspect if you want to record multiple instruments at the same time, you probably want a decent set of bandwidth on there. So you want to go for one or the other, Thunderbolt or USB, but it has to be the USB 3 standard. The other thing about Thunderbolt is it supports 10 watts versus USB 3, when it now supports 4.5 watts of power. So the devices that you're powering from your computer, if you are working remote, so if your interface is going to be studio based, doesn't matter too much. If you're going to take your interface on the road with you, you might want to power it from your Mac, or you power it from another device, Windows device. Bear in mind there is a limitation on the power buses of Thunderbolt and USB 3. As I said, one is 10 watts, the other is 4.5 watts. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, but if you think about, one of these things here, this will take 500 milliamps of power. That's half an amp. 500 milliamps of power at 5 volts. Okay, so you're going to have to start doing the calculations. How much power do you need? Second thing, how many inputs and outputs do you need? So if you're recording one input at a time, you might just need a stereo feed. If you want to record a vocalist at the same time, you need 3 feeds. If you want to record drums, you might need 8 feeds to mic up a drum kit. So how many inputs and outputs do you need? And that sort of drives down where you want to go in terms of your DAW and your interface. So it could be a simple 2 in, 2 out, or you could go for something. You could end up something with something like 20 in and 20 out, or something like that. All depends on what you're using your interface for and how much you're prepared to pay. Next thing is quality of preamps. So the preamps are effectively what increases the gain of instruments that don't come in at line level. So microphones, for argument's sake, or guitars that are DI straight in. So what's the quality of the preamp? A cheap preamp gives you sort of a limited range of frequencies that it really works well at. A good preamp will give you a wider range of frequencies. So if you're dealing with the diva from down the hallway and she's got a good set of lungs on her and a very good vocal range, you probably want a decent preamp to capture that. And the last thing is about D to A conversion. So how are you going to get the analog to digital and digital back to analog? Okay, again, the quality of the DNA converters. So what's the bit rate they're running at, and what frequency are they sampling the analog audio signal at, and converting that to a digital signal for recording. Excuse me. So, you know, the higher the bit rate and the higher the frequency that they're sampling at, the better the DNA conversion will be. So once you take all that into account and you work out exactly what it is your specification is, then you can go and buy your audio interface. So personally, what do I use? I use the Focusrite Scala A880. Okay, it is a fairly decent module. It comes in around £250. It's the little brother from their Claret range, which is sort of the higher end professional market. But I find a lot of the stuff that's on the Claret, or was on the Claret, has now made its way down into the Scarlet range. And I find the A880 is quite a lot of bang for your buck. It's £250, as I said. So gives me 2 mics, 4 line inputs. I can convert the mics from mic inputs to line inputs, so I can have 6 line inputs in total. Gives me 4 line outs. It does everything I needed to do. So there you go. I hope that answers your question. The next one comes from Natalie Oreo, and this is in response to the Kordbot and TB3, where I managed to fail miserably in trying to get the 2 things to work nicely together. And she says, that is so sad, they are not a perfect match, and I couldn't agree more with you. I really thought that the Kordbot driving this TB3 unit would be a match made in heaven. Now, I haven't given up on it. I think one of the reasons why it failed is probably my misunderstanding of how the Kordbot works. And I think the Kordbot was working in the wrong optical range and I didn't spot it. So I sort of did some thinking about this, and I think I haven't recreated that scenario because I haven't really been using the TB3 for things recently. I've been using other bits. So now I've got the TB3 back out, I might actually get the Kordbot. I'll go down to the studio and grab all of the Kordbot one day in the week and see if I can rectify the situation and make it more of a match in heaven. But I couldn't agree more. I thought this would be an absolute brilliant one. The arpeggiation as well, I'm going to try the arpeggiation with the System 8, because I think the arpeggiation on System 8 is great, but what might it sound like if the Kordbot was driving it? Let's see. And the last one from my mate Bruce in sunny California. Hi Bruce. He writes, in response to the SMR on social media and keeping your accounts safe, excellent video, and someone is presently trying to commit identity theft on my name here on YouTube. You know, it happens to the best of us. They added my middle initial to my name on their channel after starting the channel trying to hook up the Facebook interface. YouTube requested that I send my driver's license. After a month they returned with a reply that they could not see a problem. I think this is due to the fact that while every effort on identity theft is in progress on the platform or corporation, it cannot act. That's just my view. They wait for the damage to be done. Good advice, John. Prevention is the best way. Well, nice to hear that there's been another real world example of what I was saying on my rant 2 weeks ago? A week ago? Might have been a week ago. When was it? 2 weeks ago. So, I work in the technology industry. I know how things are getting hacked and how companies are getting hacked. And the only thing I can really say is, if you start using things like two-factor authentication on your account, even if somebody hacks and gets hold of your username and your password, the two-factor should stop them being able to get in and change something, and hopefully you'll get an alert of failed attempted logins and where that happens, which is what triggered me, because that was what came up on Instagram, was the trigger that somebody had been trying to hack my account from a location I was nowhere near. Remember, hit that like button if you like what you saw. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified about more rants, more mailbag, more questions and answers, and more videos about this sort of stuff when it's loaded to the channel. Until next time, bye bye.